Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm pleased to announce a series of short videos for key considerations for business owners within the staffing and recruitment sector when it comes to thinking about a sale. My name is Luke Mitchell and I'm a director at Connect Corporate Finance. We're a buy-side M&A boutique that specialises in two sectors, one of which is freight and logistics, and the other one that we will be discussing today is the staffing and recruitment sector. Seb, could I hand it over to you to talk about Saffery and your focus on the recruitment and staffing sector?
Great, thank you Luke, and thanks for having me. So I'm Seb Cartwight, I'm a partner in the transaction services team at Saffery's here in London. We are a national firm of accountants, offices across the UK from Inverness all the way down to Bournemouth and everything in between. As Luke mentioned, we've got a bit of a focus on the recruitment and staffing sector with plenty of clients across various different specialisms and perm contract focuses. So I'm looking forward to talking about it with you today.
Perfect, thanks Seb. To kick things off with our mini-series, we're going to start by talking about valuing a recruitment agency. Seb, could I pass it over to you to talk about your experience when talking about valuing a recruitment agency?
Sure, so valuing a recruitment business is not dissimilar to valuing any other type of corporate entity, in that ideally what you're looking at is what the value of the future cash flows are going to be. In reality, how that transpires is we look at how the transactions work in the space, and so as with many industries, the most common method we see is taking a multiple of earnings, and the most common earnings figure that is used is typically EBITDA. So it's pretty simple. You arrive at a maintainable EBITDA number, and I'm sure we'll talk about what maintainable actually means in this space, because it can be a contested topic. You arrive at a maintainable EBITDA figure, and you then apply an appropriate multiple, and the multiple can be either derived from public company multiples or from transactional multiples that are happening in space, so effectively a good benchmark, and that gives you the full enterprise value of the company. From that, you then need to think about other things. So for example, is there some surplus cash in the business to add on to the value? Is there some debt? So debt will always be deducted from a transaction to arrive at equity value. And then the area that a lot of people trip up on in this space is around working capital. So what is working capital? How do you arrive at an adjustment for that?
Yeah, that would be a great thing to delve further into, Seb. Could you just give a bit of an insight into what makes up that working capital calculation, and I guess how that interacts with debt as well?
Sure, so the concept here is pretty simple. So transactions normally work in such a way that a company will be acquired on what's called a cash-free, debt-free basis, subject to normal working capital. Again, that's the nuance that people normally see that as a throwaway comment. What working capital does is it ensures that wherever the business is in the trading cycle, the valuation reflects what the level of working capital is on the balance sheet, because in theory, working capital converts to cash. So if you're paying for cash, but a business has a deficit of working capital at the point of transaction, as compared to where it normally is at this point in the cycle, you'd want a deduction from the cash for that. Equally, if you're a seller, and your cash is a bit lower than it might otherwise be because you've got a lot of working capital backed up, say in debtors, or not so valid in recruitment, but things like stock or is normally quite easy for people to understand. In recruitment, it's primarily debtors. Then in a month or so's time when that unwinds, you'll have more cash. So as a seller, you'd be hesitant to sell if you're not going to get the value of that. So working capital is the real normalizer there.
Sure, and I guess drilling down on those debt-like items as well, because that is certainly a key consideration for any owner, because effectively that could, I guess, make a difference to the equity value and what the owners are actually walking away with.
Yeah, it's a really good point and a good question, because when you hear the word debt, you assume, okay, it's a term loan from a bank, and most people can understand, well, my buyer's going to want to take that off the value because they're now going to have to pay the debt, or more often than not, the debt gets settled at completion. What that means is that comes off the valuation. But what people often don't realise is that in transactions, debt is more broadly defined than that. So things like corporation tax liabilities will typically be deducted from the valuation. And in the recruitment space particularly, things like invoice discounting, it's a bit of a contentious area, but a lot of the time that's going to be classified as debt, and that will come off the price. So as a business owner, when you're thinking about, well, what's the value of my business? It's EBITDA times X. In reality, that's the enterprise value.
Exactly.
You then take up the debt items, and then that's what's left at the end.
Yeah, no, you've raised some very important points and key considerations for owners to think about when weighing up the sale of their business and what they can actually achieve during that sale. I guess that wraps up our first mini video. Thank you all for joining us, and be sure to stay tuned for our next one.